I spent a lot of time in LA because, as people know, Los Angeles has a humanitarian crisis. It is bad in Los Angeles. And I now began teaching this book in conjunction with a book called Enrique's Journey. Has anyone heard of Enrique's Journey? So the idea of Enrique's Journey, it has to do with immigration. And in my North Philadelphia classroom, you know, we finally we found common ground because in the beginning of the year it was just me, this white guy, going into this predominantly African American based school trying to save the world, right? And they're like, who is this guy? And rightly so, I had to try to establish myself, improve myself. The common ground we found was when we started to talk about people outside of their community and we brought it towards the West Coast and immigration. And we did this text alongside Enrique's Journey because we talked a lot about mercy and compassion. Like, who do we show mercy and compassion to? Why do we show mercy and compassion? What is the purpose of this? And who do we bestow upon? Who do we bestow this emotion upon? So one block deals with 3 situations on homelessness. I literally went in one block because I walked so much with this piece, and I saw 3 different stories around homelessness. And as we read this in class and then dissected it, I still, as the year ends, this was the best conversation we had. The kids, they're not kids, they're young adults. These young adults were able to sit with an idea of who to help and how to help, but were able to rationalize why they felt empathy towards someone and not as much empathy towards someone else. And I think by recognizing our bias, by recognizing why we feel the way we feel is important in getting us to think more so how we want to interact with those in our community. So this one's called One Block, and again, it's after a trip down to Los Angeles. Walking home, late Los Angeles night in November. On one long downtown block, I ran into 3 stories surrounding homelessness. The first was an elderly lady at the corner. She was speaking, lamenting, looking for anyone who would listen. She made eye contact with a younger woman. With a "where did it all go wrong" tone, she stated that she was homeless, and when the young girl heard this sad sound, she offered a helping hand. "But where to even go?" the older lady asked. Good question. Giving needs some semblance of cohesion, planning. Spur of the moment is a challenge. But this young lady proved that people are willing to help strangers when called upon. In the middle of the block, a small boy walked with his young parents. His dad stealthily hawked cans out of the trash and tossed them into the shopping cart his wife pushed on Black Friday. Those cans could buy food and heat, which are presents those of us outside of poverty take for granted. On the opposite end of the corner from where this story started, a young man was decking out an alternative sign to back up his current colorful and creatively designed piece of cardboard, which underscores how he could be a graphic designer working to appeal to people for help, even though most of those who pass him by just grace his sign, since this site is nothing new and this night in Los Angeles was no different. Yeah, that's heavy stuff, people. We gotta have some sort of smile, and I think it's important that that we breathe. Who can share a positive story, a positive interaction they had with somebody that was less fortunate? I don't care if it was today, last month, or last week. Can anybody, or is anyone brave enough to share a story they had or share an interaction with someone less fortunate recently, and maybe how it made them feel? And I'll wait. I'm good at wait time.
Sorry.
Yeah, Maura. Maura's a student that doesn't have to raise her hand. She just starts talking, and we need students like that. Perfect. Shoot.
No, I'm just saying that I work at Santa Paula Hospital.
Okay.
And we do have a lot. I mean, there's good stories and there's bad stories. But there's a woman that came in, she was really down and out.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give her a shower, just to brush her hair, just to, talk to her as a human, just that little shower just changed everything for her.
It's crazy how someone small like that.
And it's just like, nothing, no one's ever done this for me. No one's ever done, and it was, it was nice. It was nice to be able to do that for her and just to see that change in that person, so.
The idea of being able to do something for somebody else and the small things and the change that can come over someone.
Yeah.
How far is the hospital from here?
It's right up the hill. It's
Right
like
up the hill.
5 minutes.
Cool. Yeah, so we're in Santa Paula, and I know it's really neat to see this place kind of packed tonight. The fact that the library is doing that. But I appreciate that story, and again, it kind of highlights the small things. Boom, Tyler, what you got?
I had this gentleman outside my building over winter, and it was a really wet winter for anyone living in winter. And it was raining really bad one Saturday morning, and my awning outside my building is like just enough for someone to like crawl underneath and get some shelter from the rain. And I walked out and started a conversation with him, and he was so nice, and very clearly just trying to stay warm early in the morning. And he just kept telling me to like keep the hope and keep the joy in life. And you're right, depression runs, everyone deals with it, and this gentleman who is trying to stay warm and dry is, he had tears of joy in his eyes, telling anyone who listened to keep the hope and keep the joy. And it was just such a beautiful moment and something to learn from.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Sometimes people project when they're telling others to keep that hope. Maybe they're still trying to convince themselves to keep the hope. I know even as a teacher, and I really appreciate that story. We preach sometimes what we feel. And when I was sad, I would try to talk a lot about helping others. By helping others, and if we're sad or depressed, it boosts our spirits. Like physically, it'll boost us. Mentally, it'll boost us. So that idea of you helping, but then him also trying to help you, probably made him also just feel.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It made my day. I think everyone goes through bouts of sadness, and to hear those words from him, it was just you're right. And he kept telling me find the beauty and everything. And it's you're right. It is this rainy, sad morning in Ventura, but there are so many beautiful things to find. And he was just this little angel on my doorstep, kind of keeping that message alive.
Yeah, I love that. It's the reality check. Yeah, that's great. And if anyone doesn't know, Tyler's on the Avenue in Ventura. In the Avenue in Ventura. And again, I've been gone for a while. I just had my Uber driver. I'm going to talk about this Uber driver more than anything else. This Uber driver just telling me, he's like, hey, I had a city developer in here, and they said they're just wiping the Avenue. They're just wiping it clean. And then we started talking about where are they going to go? Where are you going to put the people? There's so many people, and I guess maybe this is the time to talk about the statistics in Ventura. So here's the report. I had it in 2018 because I've read at the E.G. Foster Library. That's actually where I think Anita had seen me read, and she's part of this wonderful community, and I'm going to save that idea though for later. But I read these statistics last year in 2018, and I was going to rehash them, and I'm like, come on, Brian, don't be a hack. You got to go and look at 2019. And I was so sad this morning when I did. I know we talk a lot about keeping hope. In Ventura, this past year, in Ventura County, homelessness increased by 28.5% compared to last year. And last year it already had jumped 12.5%. And the reason I wrote this book is because I saw this trend coming. I'm like, whoa, there are a lot of people that are out here struggling. And this problem's probably only going to get worse until it gets better, until we rectify it and at least acknowledge it. But I did not think, especially after the pushback we saw when the homeless man who was mentally ill, murdered, and I'll use the word murdered, when he murdered the guy at the promenade. We saw the city push back, and there was all this backlash, and hopefully I thought action might come of that. Hey, we'll get a shelter. We can get some people the help that they need, because obviously people are unstable, people need help. This unshelteredness is causing people to continuously lose their mind. But it increased 28.5%. We saw that now 75 compared to 63% of the homeless population is unsheltered. Nowhere for people to go. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You rose your hand, Mara. That's perfect.
So my question is, are you talking about homelessness that they lost everything? What about the homeless that are drug dependent?
That's a good question.
I mean, because we see a lot of that in the hospital. We see a lot of them, a lot of the homeless. So my question is to you, what are you talking about?
So the statistics here speak to homelessness in general. So they took this survey, they went to the city of Ventura and Oxnard. By the way, Oxnard and Ventura are the two highest populated areas, not surprisingly for those of us that live here with homeless. So in Ventura actually was the highest at 555 people they had counted, and Oxnard was second at 598. Santa Paula had 106. So there's just kind of a correlation. But what we're talking about with the unsheltered are anyone that is considered homeless that does not have a place to live, that is living without a fixed address and without a roof over their head, basically. And I was shocked, especially now when Tyler brought up a wet winter, 12% increase of unsheltered homeless. And when I've heard from people now that it was a cold winter and it was a wet winter, and the fact that we saw a 28.5% increase in homelessness, and not only that 12% of it more now are unsheltered. 3 out of 4 people that are homeless are unsheltered. And that's been the biggest disparity between homelessness on the East Coast and homelessness on the West Coast. As I tried to wrap my head around it this year, because I still see a lot of poverty, because Philadelphia is very poverty stricken, I thought their hair's washed. They don't have a backpack with a tent or with a blanket on it. They don't look like there's just dirt. You shake someone's hand, and I've done that. I have no problem doing that. Their hands are not gripped in dirt and caked in dirt. They're cleaner because they're not unsheltered. They still can be homeless, but they're not unsheltered. So to the statistics, they can still be drug dependent, but that number specifically spoke to the people that are living outside that had no place to go. So if we don't put a shelter within Oxnard or Ventura, it's only going to get worse. Yeah, Dan.
Are you seeing on the East Coast a lot of the not in my backyard philosophy that we're seeing in Southern California, especially reading about
Yeah.
in Orange County? And I don't want to just pick on Orange County because it's
Yeah.
a Trump area or something.
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Dan, I think you make a great point. Little zing right there. Yeah.
But are you seeing, because that seems to be a big part of the problem is, we don't want it in our backyard.
No, I think
The shelters.
The shelters,
Yeah.
I think that's specifically more California based because California has a higher homeless population. I can speak to the drug habit because Philadelphia has one of the highest rate of opioid addictions in the country. Philadelphia, this section called Kensington, is like the on the East Coast is like the capital for opioid addiction, and they're trying to open up a safe house for people so they can inject cleanly. But that has gotten a lot of pushback. Not here,
Yeah.
and I'm like, if they're not gonna do it here, they're not gonna do it anywhere because we're in Kensington right now. And Kensington is struggling. But to your point, the numbers are just drastically different. So no, I'm not seeing that. I still kept my LA Times subscription. I thought about canceling it, and I called the LA Times like, hey, I'm a teacher, I don't have all this money, and they're like, we'll just slice your subscription in half. And I was like, okay. So I kept it, and as I've been reading it, I just saw in Venice, for instance, like 2 days ago, they're using environmental protection laws to keep shelters from opening in their neighborhoods. So they're using the legislation to say, not in my backyard, but they now have legal justification to prove or to at least uphold that in the courts. So it's not this whole NIMBY thing. And you're right, Orange County is not the only one. We're seeing this in Ventura. We're seeing this in San Francisco. We're seeing this in Los Angeles, especially Venice, like I said. San Diego, no one really wants it. Property value is huge here. You pay $600,000 for a house. Of course you don't really want to have a homeless population there, but it gets to the idea of where are they gonna go? We have so many people. There has to be a better solution, and we have to compromise. There has to be some sort of compromise because the income inequality, the fact that California is so desirable. I got here this morning, I woke up, I walked outside, I go, I miss the mountains. I miss the mountains. I can deal with the water, whatever. The mountains are spectacular. And people, I was telling my buddy Pete this, California is a sanctuary state, not just for immigration, but for homelessness. If you have a car that can get you to the West Coast, you can be unsheltered now. So California is a leader in so many things in our country, and California will have to make it a point to say, how do we fix this issue? Because income inequality is sweeping our nation, but we're seeing it most predominantly between California and up the coast all the way to Seattle. I'm going to actually bash on Seattle in a little bit, not yet though, because of the tax that they struck down. But actually I'll go back to Ventura now. So that's some of the statistics and the data. So I went to Topa Topa a while ago. So I read poetry. It's not all depressing, I promise you. It is not all social justice oriented. Some of it's about love. Some of it's about Mother Nature. Some of it's about teaching. Some of it's, I don't know, about what I'm thinking. Some of it's the writing process. I love writing about writing. That's like a fun thing to do. But I went to Topa Topa, and when I read sometimes in bars, it's fun because, and shout out to Bobby. Bobby's the one that kind of got me hooked on that. Roberta was trying to hide in the corner. We were going to these open mics, and I would hit him. I'd always hit him with the homeless stuff though, because it's something that we have to talk about. But I would cake it in after I've kind of messed around with some other topics. And I finished doing this reading at Topa Topa in downtown Ventura, and I had this I wouldn't call her a young lady, but this lady come up to me, and the story that she shared with me. And the stories that I've heard from a lot of people, this has been a project that I've done for about 4 years now. And the stories and the conversations that I've had have been so enlightening. And this was probably the most enlightening conversation that I've had. It was early on in this book that I was writing it. I probably only had 10 poems at this point. But she had talked to me, and it forever changed my perception on homelessness, but it also gave me some factual data to use or something logically to think about when people ask, why don't they get a job? And that's the name of this poem. It's called, Why Don't They Get a Job? Everyone has a story. So for every story you share, someone, somewhere can relate. Tonight, it was Tatiana. With her fingers grasping my forearm, she thanked me for thinking of the homeless. She had her own story. I come from Ukraine. And when I was younger, my mother and I took trains to Russia while she looked for work. We had no permanent home, which meant no permanent work. After interviews, they wanted a number to call, but no phone means no job. Her words reminded me of the line that people popularly use to describe their view on homelessness. Why don't they just get a job? I shared this with her. My mother tried. Embarrassed, she asked if she could contact them in a few days to find out. It rarely worked. As our conversation closed and I began to walk home, I kept thinking of Tatiana's story. To escape deep poverty, you need a job. In order to get a job, you need a place of contact. When that's not there, you rely on the willingness of a stranger to extend their hand and subsequently change your narrative, all in the hopes of rewriting a story that is never, ever as simple as it seems. You guys gotta clap, man. It's like, yo, I know it's heavy stuff, people. I know it's heavy stuff. I appreciate it. I was like, oh man, this crowd dead. And you're not dead. I know it's awkward. I had a friend, Dan, in the middle of my last set. He just like stood up and said, yeah! But it wasn't about homelessness. It was kind of about something they were talking about me. And I was like, Dan, you're embarrassing. But wow, I appreciate your energy. So I kind of already shared this. Actually, this is the chance to talk about that reading. Shout out to the E.P. Foster Library. That's where I got met Anita, Anna, and I.